Next week, on Tuesday, is the actual date of the Shloshim. My parents, unfortunately, have to go back, not necessarily for that, but more significantly, because the Shloshim they would have been very happy to commemorate here, but they had an arrangement also from beforehand to be speaking at the Chabad Campus International Conference, which is being held next week, and is of course going to be represented in Cape Town by Rabbi Nissen and Rabbi Ariella Goldman, who are Chabad Campus International's newest representatives. So they're going to be rushing back for that. But at the Shloshim, my father, as is the custom, will be making a siyum, celebrating the completion of the entire study of the Mishnah during these 30 days. And it was on the 4th or 5th day of the Shiva when I showed my father the list that was almost completed. I said, okay, we're almost finished with the Mishnayos. And then he asked me, but what about Shas? I was like, what? He said, no, what do you mean? We have to do the whole Shas as well. And we started splitting up the entire Talmud, obviously between all the cousins, not for next week, don't worry, but by next year's yard site. And it was just such an insightful moment in the middle of everything, that as much as my father laughs with us and gives us smiles, and my children, his grandchildren, are starting to get a little bit of an idea of where their father gets his crazy sense of humor from. But it's not that humor and the smiles that he gives us aren't in the absence of having anything more to give, but perhaps they're only a small reflection of how much we've been blessed to learn and gain from him, both in the words of Torah from the text, but more significantly in the life of Torah that he reflects every day in his personification of Ivdu as Hashem b'simcha, serving Hashem with true and inner joy. And on that note, please welcome my dear father, Rabbi Deren, the real Rabbi Deren.
The real Rabbi Deren is my father. On the way here just a couple of minutes ago, and Zizi was bringing us, and noticed our pre-talk jitters, which is something I've never gotten over, actually, and worried about it until I once hosted Rabbi Yisrael at our Chabad house prior to a talk that he was giving, and offered him something to eat, and he said, no, I can't eat it now, and I can't. Why can't you eat? I mean, it's kosher. And he said, no, I'm going to be speaking in a little while, and I'm too nervous. And I thought to myself, well, if Rabbi Yisrael is still nervous before he talks, I shouldn't really feel bad about it. And she says to us, don't worry, it's such a nice crowd of people, they're so wonderful, you have nothing to be nervous about. And Mrs. Deren said, quite correctly, it's not the people, of course we don't worry about them, but we're speaking free in front of you and Oshi. And she mirrored my sentiments exactly, and it was compounded when I came in and realized that it wasn't just your Rabbi and Rebbitzin, but that I would also be speaking in front of Rabbi and Mrs. Popak, themselves role models for us, and so for so many others I know. So I want to begin by first a note of Hakar Satev, of thank you to just what we've been able to experience as a awesomely incredible community that you have here, and just the nachas that we get when we come and see the appreciation that you show to the incredible children that we have, And I know that they probably honestly earn it. Nevertheless, it's really wonderful to see it expressed, and for us a source of endless pride, and to you a reason to express real gratitude. Having said that, I should point out one thing. It's, to be able to fill up a room like this in the middle of the week is awesome. I want to tell you something. This man gives incredible talks every single Friday night and again Shabbos morning. I urge you to take advantage of that opportunity. Now, I want to begin with a little bit of a disclaimer. And Vivi, of course, said it absolutely correctly. We didn't come here to give a manual for tragedy. By the same token, I'm not unmindful of the fact that we are here, for the most part, or you are here, many of you are here, because of the tragedies and what it is that presumably we represent. I'm not going to talk about what we do or don't represent in reality, but I have to say that when I talk, whenever I talk, I hope that when I speak from a place that's real, and a place that at least I visit from time to time. Now I'm really not sure where I am. I'm still very numb. Not because I don't hurt, but I'm not going to start an attempt at a public self-psychoanalysis now. But it's too early for me to process. I don't know. So you'll forgive me if I perhaps sort of step up a little or down a little or away a little, I guess, and speak from perhaps a little bit theoretical. The way I think things ought to be, or the way I think things are. And to the extent that you can extrapolate from that what is actually real, that is a decision for every one of you to make. But I take no responsibility. In America, we have as a foundational value something that's enshrined in our Declaration of Independence, that the three fundamental values of humanity are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The first two I understand. The third I've often grappled with. What does that mean, the pursuit of happiness? Now, that in fact we are pursuing happiness is obvious, but should we be pursuing happiness? Is that really what life is about? Pursuing happiness? I don't yet know for sure. Perhaps not. But we are. And why are we pursuing happiness? Well, obviously, because often we're unhappy. And sometimes we're not only unhappy, but we're actually sad, grieving. We hurt. We're in pain. And we don't want it. And we want it to stop. And so we are looking for happiness. We want to be happy. We want to be joyful. And I have a feeling that that's probably the real reason that there is a standing room only crowd here tonight. It's because that's what every one of us wants on a regular basis. We want to be happy. Now, maybe these two people, the rabbi's parents who came all the way from America, maybe they have a formula, that secret ingredient, that magical pill. And they'll teach us how to do it, and tomorrow I actually will be a little happier. Ladies and gentlemen, you're right. We have it. Now, to be able to explain, though, what I mean, I think before we can talk about what it means to be happy, let's talk about the opposite of happy. Sad, which is what we don't want to be. Well, what is sad? What does it mean when we say a person is sad? You know, I have a friend, a very respected colleague, a giant, actually. And he visited me during Shiva, and he told me something incredible. There's this pasuk that we say every Shabbos morning in davening, from Tehillim. David HaMelech, David, says to Hashem, Samchenu, make us happy, kimos inisanu, like the days of our sadness. What does it mean? Make us happy like the days of our sadness. Make us happy like the days of our happiness. Why make us happy? Like, what does he mean? Make us happy like the days of our sadness. So he said the meaning is simple. He says, you know, when a person is happy, no matter how happy a person is, I mean, think of it, the happiest occasion in a person's life, okay? My only daughter's wedding. Okay, I mean, what can we, doesn't get better than that. Yeah, as good as it is, there's still time for unhappiness as well. The caterer, the mechutanim, it's just happy, but you still have space for getting mad at the mechutim. That's human nature. That's the way it is. On the other hand, when somebody is, God forbid, a tragedy occurs, the world goes black. And it goes utterly and completely black. There is no room for anything else. At that time, there's not still a little bit of room for some happiness too. Doesn't exist. The world goes dark. And that's what David HaMelech says. Samchenu, make us happy, kemeis inisanu, in the same way we are when we're sad. Completely, entirely, with no room for anything else other than just happy. Why is there no room for anything else when we're sad? Do you know why? Because when you're sad, you know what you really are? You're alone. That's what being sad is all about. Being sad is being alone. There's no one else, just me in my dark, deep sorrow. And I can be in a room filled with 1,000 people, and yet all alone. And no one can feel my pain. No one even knows about my pain. It's so deep, it's so dark, and I'm so alone. That's what sadness is. In whatever variation it comes, unfortunately, it boils down to that. Happiness then would be the knowledge and the awareness that I'm not alone. I'm not alone. The Alter Rebbe writes it in Tanya. That there's that point where, in that hidden darkness, all of a sudden you realize you're not alone. There's someone there with you. And he, with a capital H, never left you. And from that realization forward is when the darkness lifts and the sadness begins to depart. I'm no longer alone. Okay, Rabbi, great. But how do I get there? It's a lot easier said than actually done. So, in a general sense, we need to really change the area of consciousness where we live. Well, I know that was a mouthful. What I mean to say is we need a paradigm shift. We need to begin to understand that in truth we live at a whole range of levels. And based on where we happen to be in our own lives at any given point, in any given day even, we're not talking about eras in our lives, we're talking about eras in every moment or hour, but we're in different places. And we need to be conscious of that and get to where we need to be. I'll tell you a story. Our second, well, actually our fifth child, Blummy, got sick a half a year after our Shlomi passed away. She was 16 at the time? 15, I'm sorry, 15 then. And she, I mean, all of her children loved Shlomi, but she was his little mommy. Sort of the way the family dynamics worked out, for whatever reason. And obviously deeply, deeply, as all of her children were, affected by Shlomi's loss. And so when she became sick, she knew what was, and as a teenager, clearly wasn't talking, but we understood it, what she was going through. And she had to begin chemotherapy. Blumala had gorgeous long red hair. We used to call her Little Red. And that was actually her personality as well, not just her hair. And we realized that one of the first things that she was going to be anxious about, more than anxious, was of course her hair, having seen what that does. And actually the doctor told us that the specific type of chemo that she would be getting did not necessarily cause hair loss, often didn't. But, telling a teenager it often doesn't means in their mind it definitely will. So the doctor said it doesn't have to happen or something like that, but we knew it was a real issue. It was a real issue for us. And I remember the day vividly. We had spent a weekend in a very beautiful place called Camp Simcha, a magical place. And we were invited to be there. They made a weekend for families that had bereaved families. And we were coming there with Blummy, and she was the one who felt very uncomfortable about our going because she was on TPN. She knew that, I hope many of you don't know what it is, but she knew that many of the families there would know what it is and would be uncomfortable because of it. And our fears were allayed. We came, we had a great Shabbos. Shabbos morning, she woke up, she noticed some hair, a couple of them, but more than usual, on her pillow. And nothing. I remember as we drove out of the camp on Sunday morning, right, there was like this incredibly beautiful overlook that looks down onto the Delaware River. It was a magnificent place. And we were pulling into it to stop there and to enjoy the view. And Blumala puts her hand into her hair, and a whole clump of hair comes out. And she began to cry. And so Mrs. Deren did what a good mother in circumstances like that does. She turned to me and she said, "Do something." Now, she doesn't already do that. So everyone got out of the car, and I got into the back seat with her. And I said, Blumela, I had just read a letter from the Rebbe. This was to a family that had suffered the devastating loss of a young child. It was on Erev Pesach. An accident. And the father asked the Rebbe, how can I possibly... that is supposed to be conducted joyously. How can we possibly do it? And the Rebbe's response was, without quoting it exactly, that a neshama, after it passes away, remains attached to those it loved and loved it. And is misameach b'simchasam, rejoices with their joy, u'misabel b'yagenam, and mourns with their sadness. So that when you're happy, you are causing your daughter to be happy in Gan Eden. God forbid the opposite is something you don't want to do. Because the neshama is happy when you're happy and sad when you're sad. And I said, Blumela, just imagine Shlomi is probably, we can't see him, but I think he is probably right now sitting on the roof of the car, swinging his feet into the window like he used to like to do, and saying, Blumela, don't be sad, because when you're sad, I'm sad. And when you're happy, I'll be happy. And that was it. It was like a faucet turned off. Not another tear. Right into a smile. And that's the way it stayed. And to the point she was once walking down the street, I believe with Vivi or something, and she passed somebody who was wearing a t-shirt, Kathy cartoon, and it was this thing, I'm having a bad hair day. And she looks at it and she says, I should get one of those. I'm having a no hair day. Because she put herself into a different place. She realized that there is a different place for us. And we can all go there. We can all be there. I'm not talking about fantasy. I'm not talking about imagination. I'm talking about reality. Now, think about it for a moment. We're sad. We hurt. Why? Because we've lost something. Because a hope, a dream has been dashed. Something terrible has happened to us that hurts. And we feel that loss. And we feel that pain. And we want it to stop. So what do? Well, we feel it on an almost physical, material level. It hurts. And so, to stop the pain, the first response, well, I can speak only for myself, but I have a feeling it's for many of us. What we do is we sort of reach down to a even lower, more physical, material place and try and mask that pain with pleasure. Grab the bar of chocolate, the drink, the drug, whatever. And hopefully that'll cover the pain, overcome the pain, and we'll be able to get through it and by it and beyond it. And we'll of course realize that at the very best, it's just temporary relief, and so often brings actually more pain in its wake. And so, because ultimately we're not animals, we're human beings, and so we wake up and realize, no, that ain't gonna work. So instead of using our mouths or lower faculties to deal with it, we realize, as a human being, we need to use our brains, and we begin to grapple with it from an intellectual perspective and try to understand how it is that we can get beyond it and get to a place where we don't hurt. And there are many techniques. All of them difficult, and some that actually work. And if they don't, but at least in a human way, have taken us to the point where the pain is already dulled, the edge has come off of it, and we're capable of functioning again, and we move on with our lives. That's the human way to deal with it. And then there's another way. There's the Jewish way. There's a spiritual way. We call it faith. Now, you need to understand that word faith, emunah, is one of the most misunderstood words in the Jewish lexicon. Most people think faith is suspension of disbelief. Despite the fact that all of the evidence is to the contrary, nevertheless, we believe. Well, if all of the real evidence is to the contrary, then it is to the contrary, okay? It is. You are not a great believer if you pull the shade open, take a look outside and see what you see and say, but I believe it's actually daylight. That's not daylight, that's an idiot. It's dark. And that's not belief. Belief is something else altogether. Belief is a faculty that exists in a place where intellect is incapable of going. In those areas that you can't grasp with intellect. In the same sense that you can't grasp an idea with your hands the way you grasp a glass with your hands, but an idea needs to be grasped with your mind. You can't grab onto 1 and 1 equals 2. That is in your mind. That's what the intellect is for. Then there are those areas that are beyond the intellectual capacity to deal with. Beyond time and space. What does that mean, beyond time and space? Understand that. It's not understandable when you're within the confines of time and space. Beyond time and space is just ungraspable. That needs to be dealt with another faculty called faith. Rabbi, what in the world are you talking about? I don't begin to understand what you're saying. You, I know, have that faith, and I'm sure that you can do it. I'll tell you one more gripe of mine, and that is, it's one of the hardest things that we need to endure going through what we go through, which is that statement, Rabbi, I admire your faith. You have so much. Rebbitzin, you're amazing. Amazing, the faith that you have. I can't speak for the Rebbitzin, I can't speak for the rabbi. I have no more than anyone else. No more, not a drop more than anyone else in this room. One more story, if I may. This was actually, our Blumenla passed away on the 4th night of Hanukkah, which was a Friday night. Shiva began on Sunday, and Sunday night was the 6th night of Hanukkah. The house, once again, was packed. And people came. It was winter, obviously. Everybody was there for Mincha and Ma'ariv. Our custom is to light the menorah between Mincha and Ma'ariv. Finished Mincha. They sort of made a path for me to the doorway where the menorah was standing. And I stood there with the candle in my hand. And I look at the menorah. And all of a sudden, it was like a light bulb went on. nickel dropped. I finally understood something that I really never fully understood before. A question that I'm sure many of you have, at one point or another, once wondered about. I know we're in the middle of your winter, our summer. Anyways, we're probably no further from Hanukkah than you possibly could be, but let me talk to you about Hanukkah for a second. You all know it. Hanukkah commemorates, actually, the victory of the Jewish people over the mighty Syrian Greek army. This miraculous event, and that small band of Hashmonaim vanquished the mighty Greek-Syrian army. And they came back to the Beis Hamikdash, and they discovered that everything had there been defiled, and they finally found one small cruse of oil that was sufficient only to last for one night. And nevertheless, a miracle occurred. They filled the menorah up, they lit it, and it didn't last just for one night. It lasted for 8 nights, until finally they were able to bring new, undefiled oil. And so from that point onwards, we have this miracle of Hanukkah, and we commemorate it how? By lighting the Hanukkah menorah, of course. Now stop for a second to think. Let's just imagine if we hadn't had the miracle of the Hashmonaim beating and vanquishing the Syrian Greek army. What would have been the result of that? None of us would have been here. There would have been no Jewish people. It would have been over more than 2,000 years ago. We would have been nothing more than just one more blimp in the history of humanity. Let's say, however, the miracle of the oil hadn't occurred. What would have been the result of that? They would have waited 8 days and lighted the menorah on the 9th day. Lit it for a couple of days with defiled oil, whatever. A beautiful thing, but consequential in the greater scheme of things. It pales in utter insignificance to that far greater miracle which allows us to exist. Nevertheless, when it comes to commemorating Hanukkah, how do we commemorate Hanukkah? Not with a military parade, not with something about the Syrians, Greeks, and it's almost, it's relegated to a couple of lines in the V'al HaNisim prayer that we say, some of us say, on Hanukkah. And the miracle of the oil, there's no one in the Jewish community that is not aware of it on a regular basis. Why? And standing there, I realized the answer. You see, oil floats to the top. Oil is symbolic of something that's above everything else. It's beyond the intellect. In Kabbalistic terms, it's called Chachmas Tima'ah. It's above wisdom. Another word for it is faith. And there's only a little bit of it. And most of us are sure that it's almost useless. It's a drop. We need an 8-day supply, and we barely have 1 day supply. Rabbis have all they need. It's part of their DNA. They're born with it. Or maybe they get it from the Rebbitzins, whatever. But there's plenty of it for them. But for the rest of us, come on. I mean, it's, yeah, you probably can push me to a place where I'll admit that I do believe. If there's no one around listening, I'll confess. But to say that that's something that is a real and active and useful part of my day-to-day life, come on. I don't have that kind of faith. That's what the menorah tells us. It's not true. Every Jew has it. It is part of your DNA. And how much of it do you have? As much as you need for 1 day and 2 days and 3 days and 4 days and 5 days and 6 days and 7 days and 8 days. And as long as you need it, you have it. It's there. You just have to perform one miracle. Believe in yourself that you can access it. And then go ahead and do it. The truth is, the biggest miracle of Hanukkah is not that the oil lasted for 8 days. The biggest miracle of Hanukkah is that they believed they could try and see that it would last 8 days. That's all we're asked to do. It's not a difficult leap of faith. I don't know if this is a South African slogan, but Nike in America has probably one of the most profound theological statements that I've ever seen. Just do it. That's all. Just do it. The greatest gift that we have as Jews is a ladder. It's a ladder with which we, every single one of us, have the capacity to go step by step higher and higher to a place of such spiritual richness that is beyond conception. Every one of us has it. The name of that ladder? Torah and mitzvahs. And you don't have to take the whole ladder at once. That's the nice thing about ladders. They go step by step, mitzvah by mitzvah. And that's the answer. That's what we get, that ability. We get it because it's been imprinted in our spiritual DNA. There's another word for it, it's called a neshama, a soul. Now, I've never met anybody that says, I've actually met my neshama. I certainly haven't. It could walk up to me on the street and punch me in the nose, I wouldn't recognize it. But I absolutely know that it's there. And gives every one of us the ability to step up beyond even the intellectual level to that spiritual place where I can know with a certainty, I can feel with a certainty, I can experience with a certainty that I am not alone. And that every moment He is there with me. Black though it may have seemed. And then I realize, He isn't picking on me. Take out just one word. He picked me. He didn't pick on me. He picked me. Yeah, it's a challenge. Listen to our Rivky, as she says it more elegantly than I'll never ever be able to. I don't have problems. I have challenges. But I was taught, she doesn't say by my mother, but she was taught by her mother, that Hashem doesn't give us challenges without giving us the ability to meet those challenges. He's always there with us. Just to know that this isn't just a speech or even something that I've talked myself into. I just want to repeat, and with that I'll conclude. Something that occurred during one of those basement sessions of ours with our grandchildren, after everyone had left, and 4 of them remained, discussing the chocolate issue. 4, well, I can't say 4, every one of them, they're just beyond belief for me. I thought I was going to come to South Africa and have a week where we'd be able to do things, and there was 5 people here that just, nothing else happens, just them, 24/7. But this was another 4. One bar mitzvah boy, he has a 14-year-old, his 2 16-year-old cousins, and a 17-year-old older than them. And 3 of them are saying the only thing that works is chocolate. And Levi, who's our 2nd grandson, he says, the only thing that works is learning a Maimer Chassidus. Nothing will do better than that. The only thing that works, and it always, always works. Learn Chassidus. Learn Torah. do a mitzvah. One mitzvah, a second mitzvah, a third mitzvah. You don't believe me? There was this French philosopher by the name of Blaise Pascal, I can never remember his name, who was challenged by the French monarch to prove the existence of God. And he looks at him and he says, "Why, the Jews, Your Majesty. The Jews. You're proof that I'm right." Thank you.
Before we conclude in just a few moments, Mrs. Popek will give the final words of thanks, but we'll just open the floor for a few quick seconds if anybody wanted to ask any questions that my parents will address for all of us. If anyone's brave enough.
Okay, Shabbos morning, he's here again.
I just want to say thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Where's your listening? Okay. Robertson? Our partners in hosting this evening was the Nechama organization, who does incredible work year-round in comforting those who need those words of comfort. And I just wanted to thank Mrs. Popek for partnering with us, and she'll give a few words of closing for the evening.
I, unlike Rabbi Chani, did not know your daughter, not up close. I did see the clips and I did hear about her. And I would think that in her 29 short years, she lived a long life and a beautiful life of message for people from what I saw and what I heard. As I said, I didn't know her, but I did, over many years, know the rabbi and the rebbitzin, pretty much up close via my family. I knew them to be leaders. I knew them to change Connecticut in a very big way and to reach out far, far greater than just the Connecticut area. Mentors, leaders, people who would hear other people's sorrow and knew how to give strength and belief, emunah. I also knew that they gave tremendous friendship at my own home. And more than once, when my dad was in hospital, more than once, Rabbi Deren would have arrived at his bedside in hospital and within a couple of hours phoned back to Connecticut. Unexpected, no fanfare, just friendship. And these are the people that we can turn to for strength and guidance. And we appreciate their joining us tonight and giving so much in a time that's very, very precious to you, in a time of the shleishim, a time of your own sorrow, which of course you are dealing with. So from my point of view and from the bereavement organization that I'm involved with, we're very, very proud to be partnered here And we're very thankful that you shared all these thoughts with us and have given us, I'm sure, a tremendous amount of strength to look within ourselves and see what we ourselves can gain and glean from all this. So thank you very much. Thank you to Rabbi Oshri and to Rebbe Sisi for hosting. Leila Tov.